If you clicked on this video, I'm pretty sure you know what Half-Life is, but for the 3 people who don't, Half-Life is an old PC game where you play as Dr. Ned Flanders, PhD, and inadvertently cause a ton of alien species to start invading the place you work at, which definitely needs a human resources department. Pretty simple game, right? Wrong. Half-Life might have been seen as an outdated piece of jank by some youngsters, and that's because it is, but still, this game had a huge impact on the FPS genre and is still widely recognized, unlike a lot of other games from the same period, including Sin, which, believe me when I say, I'm going to talk about one day. So, if Half-Life is so cool, is it worth playing 20-something years later? To answer that question, I have absolutely no idea. But what I can tell you is how to play it. See, I've had this interaction quite a few times recently. A friend of mine goes to Steam to get Half-Life, but when they ask me which version to get, and if you don't know why this is such an important question, let me break it down. There are quite a few different ways to play Half-Life 1, and each of them has their own, quirks, I guess you could say. And while you can always modify the PC version of HL1 to include whatever features you want, there's still quite a few unique versions of this game, and today I'm going to look at the list of handful of versions of the game I think that the fans of the series history should take a look at. Today we're going to see the PS2 port of the game, the unreleased Dreamcast port, a brief look at Half-Life Source because enough people have talked about it, and also bring up the Half-Life Uplink demo and the September 1997 alpha build. Full disclosure, for the Dreamcast and PS2 versions, I'm using an add-on to the Steam build because I don't have a Dreamcast, and I'm not going to spend the big bucks on a PS2 capture card, so my footage will definitely look a bit different to the original. Right off the bat, we have a completely different menu from the original. I think the menu is neat enough, though the drawing of Barney looks a little bit weird. When we get past the decade-long train ride sequence, it won't take long for you to realize that the NPC models look a lot like the HD model pack. And that's because the port was being developed by Gearbox Software and also another company called Captivation Digital Laboratories, which I couldn't really find anything about them other than like some website on archive.org announcing the project. The character models of NPCs like the security guard and the scientist look almost identical to the HD models, but they do look a little bit worse. I'm guessing they had to lower the resolution of the textures for performance. Speaking of, a common complaint of the Dreamcast port is that the loading times are pretty long and the game doesn't run too well, which, I mean, you can't really see from my footage, but I can confirm that the Dreamcast version does have these issues. I'm not sure if these problems would still be present had this port been released in this build, but it's still definitely something to take notes on. There's not much to say about the Dreamcast port other than it exists. I personally think that the game would have been a great fit for the console, but I definitely see why it got cancelled. They also got rid of Gordon's ponytail. Like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Up next we have the PS2 version, also made by Gearbox Software. This version is definitely a step up thanks to the increased hardware specs, but like the Dreamcast port, it also has a unique title screen from the PC version. But I think this one is a bit better. The new menu theme composed by Ben Houge, I probably butchered that, sorry dude, is pretty neat, and it doesn't have Nightmare Fuel Barney, which is always an improvement. Once we get in the game, we can see that the character models are actually a bit different. The scientist models look like a bit better than the HD models, which is not really saying much. What I have a problem with is PS2 Barney. Look at this guy. The face is just so annoying to look at, and he just looks like a jerk in this version. But hey, they actually have hands this time. Goofy ass character models aside, I think the PC version's original models are still my favorite. They're a lot easier on the eyes and have a bit more charm to them, but that's not everything the PS2 version adds. It also includes a new co-op campaign called Decay. I don't have footage for it, but there's ways to play it using Saban co-op, and I'd say it's worth playing if you actually have friends. Now that we're done with the official ports, let's talk about the weird stuff. Without making a whole segment on it, there's been some efforts to have Half-Life run on either devices like the 3DS and mobile phones. I can't speak for mobile versions, but I have it tried on the original 3DS model using Zash 3DS, and it works. It doesn't really run that well. I shouldn't really be expecting much from the good old 3DS model I have, though. I've heard some people claim that Zash is illegal, claiming it uses leaked code from the Gold Source engine, but as far as I know, that's not the case with the 3DS fork released on GitHub, but obviously I'm not a lawyer. Since we've been talking about good old engine ports, I think it would be impossible to make this video without mentioning good old Half-Life Source. I don't want to waste your time on it, so if you really want to hear a deep dive into the version of the game, there's other videos on it. In short, this game is pretty damn broken. The game's map files are mostly unchanged, and it looks to me that Hammer, the application used for making Source Engine maps, treats it like it's just a gold source map file, so it's a bit of a lazy-ass port that got even more broken over time. I guess the only reason you download it is if you want to use it in the Gmod, but that's enough about Half-Life Source. Now, I could easily end this here, but while researching for this, I noticed there's a huge lack of coverage of arguably one of the most interesting parts of Half-Life's development. Basically, Valve wanted to make the game a lot more than just a total conversion of Quake, so they were started development around 1998-ish, but before that there was a working build of the game from September of 1997 that keeps a lot of content from the original version. From this footage here we can see a number of old models that didn't make it to the real version. There looks to be around 3 scientist models, one being completely unused, while the original game has 4. There seems to be 3 weapon models in this version, the iconic crowbar, a weirdly flat-looking pistol, and some sort of submachine gun. Another strange thing about these weapons is that the arm models are just some dude's arms, instead of being Gordon's arms in the HEV suit. Speaking of, Gordon looks a little different in this. I'm not sure how accurate this information was, but apparently the original model for Gordon's beta design, named Dr.MDL, was in the original Half-Life files, but it was compiled in an earlier version of Valve's model format, so it couldn't be opened normally though. Apparently it was recompiled during Half-Life Source's development, and it's also present in the files for the Source version. Funnily enough, the model is now known as Ivan the Space Biker, and you can find references to it in a few Valve titles. While it's a bit of a hassle to get prototypes of older games, you can find this build on hiddenpalace.org, though I don't know how playable it is. That being said, I promised myself I wouldn't talk about add-ons in this video, but I feel like I have an honorable mention to make. Half-Life Absolute Zero is one of my favorite mods of the original game and incorporates a lot of older models and assets from earlier versions of the game. Most notably, the Beta Security Guard model that you can actually find from the E3 1998 trailer. Now, there's one final subset of alternate Half-Life versions I want to talk about, and that's the demos. There are 2 known official demos of Half-Life 1, Uplink and Day 1, and I don't think any of these are available on Steam, so I'll be brief. Day 1, as far as I can tell, is just the first bit of Half-Life up until the end of the first day, hence the title. Uplink, however, is a different story. The demo is actually a lot different and doesn't really follow the same plot. Because I don't know how to access the original, there's an add-on for Black Mesa, which is a topic for another video, that's supposed to remake the demo called Further Data. I can't really speak for how accurate it is, though. So, that's the end of the wonders of different versions of Half-Life. I'm sure I could drag this on another 20 minutes with projects like the previously mentioned Black Mesa, but I consider that to be a lot more complicated than just a version of Half-Life. But really, all of this had to mean something. You ever notice how Half-Life has a run button? Surely that's just a staple of most video game design, but I think it's indisputable proof that Sin walked so Half-Life could run. You guys really like Half-Life content, so I decided to make more. I don't think I'll be making another video on Half-Life because that's just not what I really want to do. I don't want to be stuck as the Half-Life guy, but I have another couple videos in the works, but there's one on Sin that I'm not sure is going to be able to be made in the time frame I make these videos in, but hopefully. Without further ado, bye.